In total, there were 69 activities. I bought a total of 1,850 euros in stocks and sold 600 euros worth. In total, I received a net dividend of 152 euros. That came from 47 dividend payers. And with that, welcome back to my channel. My name is Marco. Let's take a look today at the portfolio update for the period of February 2026 together. In total, I had an unrealized price gain in this period of 7,456 euros and dividends of 150 euros, as already mentioned. Then let's just take a look at the top movers. These included Canacol Energy, Himalaya Shipping, Anglo Gold Ashanti, DHT Holdings, and Nordic American Tankers. So here we see shipping in particular has really picked up again in this area or in this month by around 30%. This is also reflected here in my larger positions. Here 13% for CMB.TECH, Dorian LPG with 24%, for TORM also with 24%, Thongela with 12% is coal, but that sector also picked up. BWLPG with 17% and Flex LNG with 2%. That means we've already gotten a relatively clear picture for this period. So shipping and raw materials are simply picking up again in the end. Then let's just take a quick look at the performance since purchase for my largest positions. Here I'm currently up 40% with CMB.TECH. With Dorian LPG it's 50. With TORM it's 60, with Thongela it's 30, BWLPG with 96%, EcoPetrol with 25% and Vale with 50%, and ZIM Integrated Shipping currently also with 79%. I don't want to keep you in suspense any longer. This is about dividends, so I'd say let's just take a look at what activities there were during that period. I'd say let's also look at the largest positions, which would include AKBP with 5 euros, Dorian LPG with 48 euros and 4 euros, then AKBP with 2 euros 37, then APA Corp with 1 euro 40, Cardinal Energy with 2 euros 86, 2 euros 52 for Realty Income, then 4 euros 32 for Riley, 13 euros 16 for British American Tobacco, Verizon with 2 euros 98. Exactly, that was my monthly overview for February, so to speak. It's possible that a few more stocks will pay out, or rather, where I'll still receive the payment. With Scalable, there's sometimes a delay of up to a week actually. And that's why it's possible that more will come in. We'll just take another look at that in March then. So we'll just remember the figure of 152 euros 28 net. But it could also be that it just gets flushed in during February. And so in the end, it all kind of balances itself out again, so to speak. That is for now a broader overview, so to speak. I would say we just take a quick look at the larger positions. I think that is probably what interests most people, what my largest positions ultimately yield, perhaps in terms of dividends. I would also say we look into Cardinal Energy and we can take a quick look at APA too. Otherwise, British American Tobacco as a defensive sector, I would say we should also take a look at that. What else do we have that might be interesting? We can also take a quick look at Verizon. It is not a large position, but it could be exciting perhaps. So for Dorian LPG, 81 shares in total, entry at 21 euros 73, 1,759 euros 84 invested. In total, I have received a dividend of 458 euros 36 gross on my entry of 1,759 euros. That means I have already gotten a bit back here. Then let us take a look at what was paid out by Dorian LPG last year. Here we were at 2 euros 19. I bought in at 21 euros, which means my yield on cost is roughly, it is actually 10% here. Let us just see how 2026 will go. There are many factors that make the whole thing, well, especially in the shipping sector and also with the oil price, very volatile. So it just remains exciting. You just have to look at the latest news and also the next quarterly reports here. Otherwise, I would say shipping actually looks a bit stronger overall right now in the end. Then, of course, we still have Aker BP here. My entry here was at 19 euros 62 with a total dividend of 20 euros that I have already received. And there was a payout of €2.25 here. What did I just say? Right, €20.58. So here too, I have nearly 10% as yield on cost, a bit over. And then let us see how 2026 will develop here. A dividend growth of 16% here as well. Let us take a look at Cardinal Energy. It is a somewhat smaller company from Canada. Very interesting to me because they even switched to monthly payouts. Currently, I have received a dividend of €46.94 with €416 invested. That means I have already gotten about 10% back. Entry is at €4.04. Let us take a look at the dividend. Last year it was 46 cents, so here too I am just over 10% yield on cost. For 2026, it has already been announced through March, starting with 11 cents in the end. So far it looks a bit like slightly less will be paid out, but that could still change. We've had somewhat lower oil prices this whole time, so here too we just have to keep an eye on how the whole thing will develop. For APA, my entry point is €23.75. It's a relatively new position. Dividends of €11.79, and last year there was a dividend of 89 cents, which is roughly, well, let's say 5%. Currently, 43 cents have already been announced specifically for APA. Let's just take a look here too. Overall dividend growth here is at 24%. Then for British American Tobacco, one of my longer positions that I've held for a while now. Here I've already received a total dividend of €140.76 with €608.39 invested. So here I've definitely already received a bit more than 10% back just in dividends. €32 is my entry point, and in total €2.79 in dividends was paid in 2025. That means my yield on cost here is slightly higher than the actual dividend yield. You can calculate all that for yourself, of course. We could do it too, or you can just do it yourselves. I have plenty of tools that offer exactly that. Otherwise, Verizon is actually an exciting position for me too, I have to say. I also bought it when it was still relatively underwater with a rather small entry point actually. And here I've already received a gross dividend of €6. The entry point was at €40. So I only hold 2 shares in total. And here the dividend is at €2.44 though, and currently already announced at €1.19. I think Verizon as a telecommunications company is a good defensive block in the end with a good, nice, attractive dividend in my view. So those were all the dividends for now. I'd say let's just take a look. We can take a quick look at Petrobras because Petrobras is also a larger position. We can also briefly include in-play oil. So a bit more has been added now, but I think that's fine. It adds value for you too. So in-play oil is actually a small cap too, currently up €50 here. My entry point is €7.99 with €186 invested. I've already received €13 in dividends here. And then let's take a quick look at the dividends. Monthly payers here too, and 68 cents here last year. That's also about 8% here and currently 17% announced. So yeah, it would probably be a 7 to 8% yield on cost. Yeah, in that case. Otherwise, Petrobras is a somewhat larger stock for me. The entry price was €5.93 with a total gross dividend of €70.12 received so far, which is about 10% overall. On my total invested capital, I should say, because you sometimes invest with a bit of a delay, you don't always get a full year's worth of dividends, which is just something that happens. Exactly, so my entry price is €5.93 on average. And last year the payout was 58 cents. That's a bit more than 10% in my case. And for this year, 15 cents have already been announced, definitely less than last year at any rate. Here too, we'll just wait and see what happens with the oil price. Then let's just switch over real quick to my buys and sells. So I'll leave the dividend aside for now. We're not interested in that at the moment. I decided to buy more Dow because it's a chemical giant that's almost a monopoly. Maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration, but it's definitely a huge chemical company. And in my opinion, you can't really get rid of it. Sure, it's been struggling lately and had some bad press, but in my case, bad news is just a reason to buy. And then I think we just have to wait and see how it develops. It could be that I'm in the red for a year or definitely get paid a lower dividend, so the dividend has already been reduced here too. Currently it was around 6% last year. 30 cents have already been announced here. In my view, I've achieved a favorable entry, now at 30, so almost 27 €43. Let's see what the payout will be for this year. But I think in general this is a stock that I can definitely hold for several years with a clear conscience. But we'll have to see how things develop here with the whole chemical industry. But currently they've generally been taking a hit. But if you look at it overall, you can see that they've paid out well in the past, now €2.59. If I approach this with a 5-year horizon, it's possible that my yield on cost here will simply reach 10% in the long run, maybe even higher, and that's ultimately just my speculation. Otherwise, I bought more diversified energy simply because I was also taking a big hit here. And in my view, the company is solid. I looked at the quarterly reports and was actually positively surprised in the end, which is why I just bought more. Exactly, let's just take a quick look at the dividend here too. We can see that the dividend has been cut, currently at 7.62%, or rather from last year. It's already 25 cents now, as just announced, which is also a bit less again. But I mean, honestly, even if you only get maybe 6% for a year in the good phases, you'll get 10% again. I mean, I don't know, 7%, so I'll gladly take that. Other than that, I've expanded into another defensive sector, specifically essential utilities, simply because water treatment is always sensible, also to ultimately include as a bit of a recession buffer. Water treatment is always sensible, definitely in my opinion. These also pay a dividend. So, in my view, that was perhaps even a good option. Sure, it's 3.37%, like with Mondelez, for example, it's usually only around 3%. But honestly, dividend growth over 5 years at 2.4% and over 10 years at 6.63% for water treatment is absolutely justifiable in my eyes. So, otherwise, what have I sold? I sold Keppel, Hong Kong, China, and gas. Why did I do that? Well, Keppel is still a very good company in my opinion. They provide data centers, among other things. So why did I sell then? Well, I got in with a smaller amount in any case. And I just said, okay, I'll take the 80%. Now I even received a dividend. And well, I mean, at some point you have to take some profits. And here I just finally took the good years with me, or the good year. I mean, I bought on the 19th of the 3rd for €103 and sold for €188.80. And I also took the entire dividend with me here, with a net of almost 6%. And then the price gain on top. In my opinion, it's absolutely justifiable. You also have to say that at some point you might want to take a profit. And especially when the stock has risen so sharply, well, then a correction is actually more likely to be guaranteed. And you also have to say that a dividend yield of 2.66 is quite nice. But I also just saw potential elsewhere here. Then Hong Kong, China, and gas, simply to reduce the China risk a bit again. Because it's getting a bit tricky for me right now, especially with gas stocks, maybe also in the emerging market sector, at least in China. And I've already received a dividend here too. And yes, sold for €182.48. And you can see I've had the stock for quite a while, since 2024, and accordingly I just took the profit. Because here too, as I said, the company itself isn't bad, but I see my potential and just wanted to take out a bit of risk from my portfolio. And in the end, that's also part of it, that you simply keep an eye on your portfolio and maybe say, okay, I should probably take out a bit of the risk somewhere after all. Other than that, I've topped up on Enbridge, also in my eyes just a good value because it's simply defensive here because of the pipeline. Otherwise, I bought more of Freenet. I wasn't really sure the whole time, to be honest. Not quite so sure whether I should buy or not buy. I actually had a strong plus. So I had actually bought 2 shares for 22 euros back in 2023. They then somehow already ended up at 40 euros, and then the train was somehow gone where I maybe wanted to jump on and already had a yield on cost of 10%, which is why I didn't want to sell the position either, but not increase it either. And now they came down a bit on the 20th of February, where I then said, okay, I'll top up now. And I think here too, as a defensive value, it's also absolutely pleasant with a dividend of 7.14%. We have a dividend growth of 118% over 5 years. So I said, okay, look, I'd rather top up here and then we'll see how the whole thing develops. So what else did we top up? Okay, so I also sold OCG, which is, let's say, irrelevant. I might have taken a price gain of 30% there with an entry of 10 euros. That's absolutely uninteresting. Then I topped up on Total Gabon, which is, among other things, an annual payer, and they even paid twice last year because they ultimately had such a good profit. Why did I do that? Well, the dividend actually speaks for itself here too at 10%, dividend growth 13%. Sure, definitely an increased risk too, but I mean, you have to look at 2025, 90 euros, 70 was simply paid out here as a record dividend. 2024, almost 22%, here also 22 euros. Then 72, here once with only 3.69 euros at 2%, otherwise 47 euros. So they do pay out well. If you get less in a bad year, you can always buy more, because the share price might also be, in my eyes, it was ultimately just a buy. Yes. And then it looks as follows here at the moment. A total value of 621 euros, invested with 544 euros. I hold 3 shares. Dividend already received of 19.85 euros. Yes. Exactly what else do we have here? Otherwise, I had taken a sale with Franklin Resources and Vodafone too. Let's just click through everything. I think this video will be a bit longer now, but I mean, that definitely doesn't matter. Received 5 euros in dividends. Finally took a price gain of 18%. I think the quarterly figures, the last ones, they weren't quite ideal, I believe. And the dividend wasn't increased either. We're also at 4.8% here, which is ultimately very strong as well, but in the credit sector and so on. I'd like to scale back a bit for now because I think it could be that the, market might not be quite 100% stable as it perhaps is. And that's why, I took the risk out. If the stock should fall again and I see an interesting entry point, then why not? But currently it's sold. Yes, Vodafone is also struggling a bit, I'd say. And the dividend was cut again, so I finally sold the stock too. I've taken the dividend here and also a realized gain of 35%. Yes, I think not much needs to be said about that. As I said, the dividend was cut to 3.52%. In my view, I then took the profit and said, okay, I'll look for my opportunities elsewhere. Among others in Freenet. Then we come to Hapag-Lloyd. Why did I do that? Well, among other things, the takeover speculation with Zim, or rather what is now, I'd say, currently more or less already concluded. Also, it was just underwater by, 28% on the position. And I usually say, if I'm 10% below my entry point, I like to buy more. And here I said, okay, it ultimately makes sense for me to just buy more. Now I hold a total of 6 shares here. I'm invested with 766 euros 80 and a dividend of 16 euros 40, which I've already received. Let's take another quick look at the dividend here too. Here they're at least at 5.69%. We have dividend growth here of 50%, which is already very pleasant over 5 years. And then we'll just see how that continues to develop with containers. So what else do we have? China Petroleum and Chemical, actually exactly the same here as with Hong Kong, China and gas, also here just to take out some risk or to minimize it. And here too, I received a dividend of 6 euros and simply took 11% in the end. Also not a bad company in itself, as I said, but here too, the opportunities are rather better elsewhere. And due to the current geopolitical tension, in my view, it's quite good for my portfolio in general to take out a bit of risk there. Otherwise, regarding the dividend, we're at 4.54% here. So here too, there are other producers, I'd say, that also pay a bit more. So exactly. Otherwise, that was actually just reinvestment. That was actually Scalable had a new feature where it's automatically ticked executed in the end. And I tried that out once and yeah, I took it out again, yeah. Because I want to control it myself, what's ultimately going on. Other than that, I bought more Pfizer shares. I now have 13 shares in total with an entry price of 23.54 euros. Invested 300 euros in total and dividends, which I've already received, of 6.86 euros. I wouldn't rule out increasing my position here if the prices remain interesting. Just like with Novo Nordisk, currently we're at 6.57% with a dividend growth of 2% and 4% over 10 years. So exactly, I'd say buy Pfizer and Novo Nordisk when they're in interesting buy zones. Well, it's a buy for me at least, but of course everyone has to weigh up for themselves what ultimately fits their strategy and portfolio. Then what happened already in March? In March, there were already 13 activities with 26.96 euros in dividends. I don't think I've actually bought anything here yet. No, exactly. We can also see DHT Holdings actually landed in March and was supposed to land in February, just like Petrobras. And those are ultimately well, let's say the differences that can crop up, just like Himalaya, which should have been in February too. But it doesn't matter because in the end, you can see from the total sum whether there was a deviation or not. And yes, of course, I also report on this every month in more detail and see exactly what's going on and if it all adds up. And then we also have my portfolio dashboard where I also take a look at the whole thing. Yes, and that's the current situation. Then let's take a quick look at the dividend calendar again. Exactly, and for March 2026, a total of 782.60 euros is predicted for me here. And here our highest payers are Suncor Energy, then Vale, then UPS, which pays out 11 euros, followed by Pfizer, Global Ship Lease, and finally Lyondell, Basell Industries. So a chemical giant here too, which in my opinion has also been undervalued this whole time, just like Dow. Otherwise, what else do we have? Höegh Autoliners with 18.55 euros. Then Okeanis Eco Tankers with 13.37 euros. And we'll definitely take a look in March to see how my yield on cost is doing, because I think it's really going through the roof right now. Otherwise, Flex LNG with 53.70 euros, Dow with 7.55 euros, 5.10 euros for Itaú Unibanco. That's one of the biggest banks in Italy. So what else do we have? Cardinal Energy, as mentioned, monthly so here in this case with 7 euros, with 4.65 euros, excuse me. Then Kumba Iron Ore is currently still estimated, so expected at 20.30 euros. Let's also take a look here at how things will ultimately develop. Hafnia, Genco Shipping and Trading, Starbulk with 4 euros and Frontline with 27 euros, Petrobras with 13 euros, Flowers Foods with 5.76 euros, BW LPG with 65.16 euros, Appleby Realty Trust expected at 36.39 euros. Wallenius Wilhelmsen with 58 euros, Nordic American Tankers with 13.93 euros, Torm with 66.42 euros. Yeah, so we see shipping is paying out well for me in March. BP with 13 euros, 11 euros, MPC, Kraft Heinz with 6.90 euros, BP with 13 euros. Fortescue with 7.50 euros, SFL with 7.20 euros, International Seaways with 37 euros. Exactly, there were some really high dividend payers in there. Novo Nordisk here too, the ex-date is the 27th of March. So if the price is maybe still favorable, you could perhaps take the 2% since it's semi-annual. Maybe take that with you. Then 9 euros for Western Union, or the Union. Enbridge with 25.11 euros. Banco do Brasil with €6.49. Yeah, and those would be the biggest dividend payers, so to speak. So it's going to be very exciting in March. Yeah, otherwise something else just occurred to me. I'm thinking, I think that would actually be it in general. If anything else occurs to you, of course, you can let me know at any time. One small quick thing again as self-promotion, so to speak. What's new now? You now have the opportunity to sign up for portfolio updates. That means you can leave your email address on my website. That means you'll get weekly, that's the idea, information about what happened on the market during the week, and also what might happen next week. Possibly also with a monthly briefing. I still have to see how I'll do that in general. Otherwise, I'm also currently doing this weekly review topic, and I could imagine sending that out on top of it via email. That means if someone has less time to watch a video, they can say, okay, I'll take a look at this instead. So I could imagine that I'll be writing something regularly there and sending it out too. Primarily probably the summary, or also what might be coming up next, or what my perspective is regarding cycles, maybe also explained simply with charts and graphics. So that's probably how it's going to be. I basically just introduced that today. So that means feel free to sign up here for the newsletter. It's called MB Capital Insider. If you don't want to, that's perfectly fine too. It's definitely new now. You can just write to me and let me know if it's interesting for you to sign up there or maybe not. Yeah, otherwise, I think that's it for my complete portfolio deep dive for the month of February. Yeah, then as always, I wish you successful investing. This video is of course not investment advice, but just my personal strategy.